Hoje finalmente vai ter reunião, conversação, conversação, conversação de paz.
What can I say, man? It's incredible, isn't it? I mean,
It's a little touch nippy here up in the topper part of Rio de Janeiro. I've got Damian here who is going to tell us a little bit about AfroReggae, because since I've been here, everyone's talking about AfroReggae and been reading a lot about them in the press back home. Tell us a little bit about the whole concept of AfroReggae.
AfroReggae is an organisation that works in Rio's slums, and which are some of the most violent urban areas in the world, non-conflict areas. What it tries to do is take art and culture into these slums and replace violence with art and culture, thereby creating bands, creating circus troupes, theatre groups and so on. The favela where it began is Vigário Geral in the north of Rio de Janeiro, which used to be traditionally was one of the most violent in the city. It was the headquarters of the Comando Vermelho, which is Rio's largest drug faction. These drug factions control the favelas. Nearly all of them are controlled by a different faction. The Comando Vermelho is the most powerful. In the early 90s, Vigário Geral was a base for kidnappers, drug dealers. All the biggest criminals in the city used to pass through there, and it became a sort of school of crime. One day, the leader of traffic there, the guy who was in charge of drug trafficking in Vigário Geral, called Flávio Negão, killed 4 police in a deal over a deal that went wrong, a payoff that went wrong, executed 4 police. The next day, a death squad arrived, 21 police officers with hoods on their, covering their faces, arrived and shot up the favela. They killed 9 people at one bar, they killed a whole family sitting in their house. And this terrible incident really was sparked off AfroReggae's growth and work inside the communities, because they started to attend meetings there. They already had a newspaper going, which was the very start of the whole thing. We began to attend meetings in Vigário Geral. They set up a few workshops, started with capoeira, started with percussion, and it grew and grew and grew. They set up their first band towards the end of the 90s. They released Nova Cara, their first album, I think in 2001, signed by Universal, sold 15,000. They've just released their second album, and what they aim to do is get a golden disc here in Brazil. The band itself generates 30% of the AfroReggae's income. It now works in 4 different favelas. It has a different type of project in every single favela, because they tailor it to each community, because no one favela is the same. They've got different history, different population, different needs and so on. In Vigário Geral now, as well as the band, they have 8 other smaller bands. They have a all-woman rock band, they've got a reggae band, they've got a drum troupe called AfroLatu playing on oil drums. And what they've basically created is, where there was a factory of psychopaths, literally people, killers, criminals, they've now created a sort of cultural, I've forgotten the word, but it's basically a cultural factory, basically churning out musicians, music. They also mediate in conflicts between the gangs, and they also have a policy of trying to actively get traffickers out of trafficking to come and work with them, to act as a reference point, so that the kids who are working in crime, who are drug soldiers, who tend to be in their teens, can look and see that there is another option, another way of doing things. And they've actually got some quite big dealers out in recent time. They recently got someone who was working as the boss man, the man in charge of Vigário Geral now, who's 35, and he had been involved in crime since he was 12, so he'd never been to school, couldn't read or write. Now he's working with AfroReggae, he's doing reading and writing lessons, and this sort of person acts as a conduit to try and get prevent this from happening, and to get other people out to join AfroReggae. So it's about offering alternative. It's also about bringing people from different cultures, different classes together. So
how can you do that? How can you bring people from different classes together in a favela?
What they do is they'll bring people from out. This is a divided city. What you have is you've got the asfalto, where we can see now, we're looking over the Zona Sul, you're looking over Ipanema, Copacabana, Ipanema down there, some of the most expensive real estate in Brazil. Over the other side, you've got the Baixada Fluminense, the Zona Norte, Complexo Daimer, some of the poorest areas in the continent. The people from the asfalto tend to regard the favela as somewhere they won't go, a no-go area. People there are all criminals, but in fact there's 2 million people in the city live in the favelas, and they do all the menial work. They drive the buses, they clean the cars, all this sort of work. So AfroReggae tries to bring the favela to the city, and then the city to the favela. It puts on concerts, it invites people into favelas to see shows and so on and so forth. They also work with the police. They took the same formula, workshops in percussion, capoeira, theatre, that they used with adolescents in favelas, and they took it to another state, Brazil's third biggest city, Belo Horizonte, and did the same work with police, and it's been very successful because the police themselves are one of the most discriminated groups in the country. They tend to be poor, black, undereducated, and they come from the same communities. So that's what they work. They have a formula, they'll take it and they'll do it with whoever they can. And when they came to London now to play in the Barbican with the 2 sell-out shows, it wasn't just the band, it was 30 people. They had the band of 13, and then they had a whole team of about 10 instructors, and they had graffiti instructors, percussion instructors. They worked in schools in Hackney, they worked with the Dragon School in Oxford, which is one of the most elite boarding schools in the country, and they worked in Manchester. So they'll work with anyone, and it's about using culture to bring people together. But here in Rio, principally to stop violence and give people an alternative.
Wow. Where are you from? What are you doing here?
I'm from London, and I worked for 8 years for Amnesty International. 4 years working, monitoring and campaigning against human rights violations here. The human rights situation in Brazil is very serious because generally people ignore it. The middle classes don't want to know about it. They think it's all criminals. The prisons are very, very overcrowded. You go to police stations, you've got a cell designed for 4 with 30 people in it. There's torture, there's police killings, there's death squads. But it generally goes on away from these areas. It'll go on away from the Zona Sul. It'll be in the poor areas in the north. And people ignore it. So I was doing that work for 4 years. It's quite tiring, quite exhausting, and you always feel like you're looking sort of into a tunnel. In 2003 I met Junior from AfroReggae, and it was the only really positive thing I could see, and it was very positive. So that's why now I've started working them. I took a sabbatical year, wrote a book about them which we've just published, which is published by a publishing house called Latin America Bureau, with the author Patrick Neat, who came out to work on that. That's called Culture Is Our Weapon. That was published in March, and then I've been working with AfroReggae since January, and very happily staying here for the time being.
Thank you very much, mate.
Okay.
That's great.
It was great.
Really, really brilliant.
You speak really eloquently about it.
That's cool.
Conversação, conversação, conversação de paz.